Welcome to the Connected Campus podcast, where we explore the ways that diverse professionals are working every day to optimize their efforts to recruit, retain, and graduate their students.
We are here with our premiere episode of Season 2 of the Connected Campus podcast here at Pathify. Very excited to have a friend of Pathify that we've collaborated with in a few different ways over the past year. If you've been kind of keeping a keen eye on our blog posts and our virtual webinars and sessions and things that we put on, she is I'm sure very well known by a certain audience, folks that work in sort of marketing, social worlds in the higher ed, founder, creator, and sustainer of Higher Ed Social as sort of this community. But she does, day-to-day work every day in higher education. Kasandrea, if you want to introduce yourself, kind of your elevator pitch of kind of who you are, what you do, and then we'll dig in a little bit more with sort of all the different things that you do.
Sounds great, Destin. Hi, everybody. My name is Kasandrea Sereno, and I am currently the Dean of Retention and Engagement at Tulsa Community College. And like Destin mentioned, I founded a little group called Higher Ed Social back in 2015. And we have since grown to over 12,000 members in more than 80 countries, primarily folks who work in or touch social media for colleges and universities and nonprofits in some way, shape, or form. So it's been a wild ride over the past, almost, is it really 9 years now? I can't even believe it's 2024. Oh my gosh. But yeah, we've been around for a hot minute and gotten to play in the ed tech space and see what's been coming along. And so huge fan of Pathify and the work that they're doing, and just really excited to be on the podcast with you today.
Yeah, appreciate. Yeah, you've been, generous with your time, because I think that's always like a good acknowledgement. The folks who like, sit on a panel or write something. It's like, you're giving your time and all that. So we certainly appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, I think just, you can, I guess, weave in your day job at Tulsa Community College, maybe if it sort of applies, but like, yeah, it's been nearly a decade of higher ed social. It is just like a really cool thing and something unique about your story that I wanted to kind of spend a little bit of time with. Like, just a little, tell us a little bit more about that work of like, maybe what inspired you to create it, how it's sort of like impacted the work that you've done day to day or anything, or just anything that comes to mind, I guess, just sort of anecdotes about, yeah, creating and sustaining this community, which I know is maybe, I'm sure at different times taking up a lot of your, your time or, whatever, but it's like, worthwhile. I think it's been just like a really meaningful community, a lot of people. So like, what has that meant to you, I guess? And what are some anecdotes, I guess, from the journey?
Yeah, so I did not set out to start anything that was going to be this big. Honestly, it was complete happenstance. I was in a Facebook group for social media managers. There was a girl who had created a social media manager training very early on, when social media management was becoming a job that you could actually get at a company, that wasn't just under marketing or PR. They were starting to give them job titles, and she had a Facebook group for folks who had taken her training. And someone posted up May of 2015, hey, I'm new to my role. I just took a job at a college and I'm coming from corporate and I don't understand how any of this works. It's so different. The timelines are different. I'm getting a lot of pushback, and I feel like maybe I took the wrong job. And has anybody else worked at a college or university? Can you help me? And so at that point, I was like, oh, yes, I have worked at a college for most of my career. Not intentionally, it just kind of happened that way. And so I messaged back and said, hey, yep, I've been in higher ed for close to 10 years at this point. And so, yeah, I can totally commiserate. Let's chat. And a couple more people jumped on that thread. And so that evening, I put together just a quick Facebook group just so we could pull folks together into a space, and we weren't gonna keep taking up that one long thread or monopolize this other gal's Facebook group. And so just kind of put them in a virtual room together and said, hey, you guys expressed interest in this, and here's a couple of my friends who work at colleges and universities, happy to throw open the door and kind of explain what higher ed is all about. And my journey in higher ed, I started as a really involved student leader. I was a tour guide. I was an orientation leader. I was in Greek life. I was in student government, as you naturally do with student affairs. Went on to do my master's in education, graduated right into the recession of '08, which was wonderful. went back, eventually had the opportunity to start working at a community college, moved back to the university side. Along the way, got my MBA, and never really thought I was going to make higher ed my career. I was always really intrigued by the idea of business, marketing specifically, organizational development, buyer behavior. Why do people buy and work for companies? What's this sort of strong attachment we have to them? And so I always imagined I was going to step out of higher ed into the marketing space. And 2015, 2016, 2017, that's really what I was looking to do with my career. I was an academic advisor and I really wanted to make friends with people who did social. And I figured, well, if I can get in the door to college or university, do social with them, and then I can step out to corporate. This will be my baby step onto this
Mhm.
career that I really, really, really want to have. And the universe had other plans. It said, no, no one's going to hire you for that. So you're going to stay in your day job. And not for lack of trying, though, and just really worked on building my network. And for the first few years of higher ed social, it was very, very slow organic growth, maybe a couple hundred people a year. I think at the end of year three, going into year four, we were at 600 people. So very grassroots, very small. And it was a community of folks that were just very unvarnishedly trying to figure out the work. Folks who were marketing for colleges or universities, folks who worked in corporate that had gotten moved to a higher ed institution, folks who were academics by trade, student affairs people, professors, that someone handed them a Twitter account and said, here, you manage this. And they were coming totally new into the marketing side. And so it was very much a learning playground. At the beginning, I don't know how to do this. Does anybody know why the platform is being weird today? Let's all laugh at these cat videos together. And so it was just a really
Mhm.
cute corner
Mhm.
of the internet. And then along came COVID, and that's where we really saw the triple digit expense of growth. Prior to 2020, we were probably around getting upwards of maybe 1 or 2 thousand people, and then during COVID, everybody went online, and it really coincided with this sweet spot of higher ed that everybody wanted to be on social. Every department needed to have a social channel, and so we were getting people left and right that were saying, I'm new to my role, but my department just started a Facebook group, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do, or I don't have a background in photography or graphic design. Someone please help. And so a lot of what we did through the pandemic was scaling up of understanding for people, helping them get acclimated to the business mix of what is marketing, what is social, and at the same time living through sort of a renaissance in our occupation where it is being defined as its own specialty niche. It's not just marketing, it's not just PR, it's not just advertising. It is a mini amalgamation of a lot of things. And so we truly are flying the plane while we're building it as an industry and as a community. And so we did a lot of that. Most recently, what we're seeing coming out of the pandemic is a real big focus on mental health and what that means for the social media team, both on a campus, but also as an industry, to be that person who's reading the mean tweets constantly, to be that sounding board for an organization. And what does that mean? And so it's been a labor of love. I can't believe it's actually been almost 9 years at this point. That is absolutely bananas to me. But hopefully, we'll hear for the next 10 and see the evolution of what this looks like as not only a community but as an industry that people get careers in.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you kind of sharing, the whole kind of context and story and everything, because I think to me, a big part of it is just like that idea where there's, I guess, like the tacit acknowledgement to begin with of like, marketing and social is work that sort of warrants, a certain amount of, kind of focus, attention, and sort of kind of speciality and everything. And then that, like you said, has really just kind of evolved quite a bit and matured. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting where like social and just kind of digital engagement, I guess, like kind of writ large, like it's constantly changing. So it's not even if it's like, well, I wrote the playbook, back in 2015, and just kind of keep recycling it and maybe like, making marginal updates. But and I think especially even now, like I feel like it's in such a like ambiguous place,
Yeah.
such a different place. So I think there's just always a lot to be kind of learned, and even just the idea of like marketing communications work, and so the maturation and the respect, I guess, that it's sort of garnered. Over the span of time is sort of kind of an undercurrent, I guess, to all that. But and I guess like yeah, there's one. I'll just also say, I guess, before I forget, kind of this like to mention this like those sort of like digital professional communities. Like I'm in a couple of them that are like relevant to me, and like there is just something like kind of cool and unique about them because I feel like it is that idea of they can put the right amount of structure around people and like they'll kind of sustain it to an extent. You do have to kind of maintain,
Mhm.
that structure and try to keep up with what folks are looking for. But yeah, there is just kind of a unique magic of like a Slack group or Discord or, Facebook group, whatever else. So I
Well, it
appreciate you,
is. And I think
helping to sustain that. Yeah.
yeah, and I really think that is to us showing us a shift in how we are building and sustaining genuine human connections in a technology augmented space. Everything is so much more integrated now, right? You could think of it, back when I was in college, right? 2004, 2005, you had your online time and your offline time, your online friends, your offline friends. And there might be some bleed over, right? If you're on instant messenger and you're messaging your friends, but your time spent on MySpace or Facebook was largely separate and distinct from your time spent with your in-person relationships. And what we're seeing right now is there is so much interconnectivity, and the way that we are doing work, the way that we are approaching pleasure or leisure activities weaves almost synchronously on and offline, right? So I could be talking with a friend at a potluck at work, and she's going to share her recipe for these cookies that she brought. And that link, I'm going to be able to go on there, and that's going to have the recipe, but it's also going to have a link that I can jump on DoorDash, and I can have those ingredients DoorDash to my house from my local grocery store, so that those ingredients are at my house when I get home today, so I can make cookies for my family. And we've never had that sort of relationship both on and offline. And I think that's really interesting because that seamless integration of experiences is what our students are coming to expect with their college experience, and really honestly with their experience in general, right? I'm at the mall, I'm looking for shoes, my phone knows where I am because I'm geotagged. And so tonight when I'm at home, I'm going to get Google ads and Facebook ads for shoes because it knows, right? This integration and making it easy for me to do the work and create the intended outcome that I want, whether that is getting cookies or buying shoes or going to college. I expect it to be easy. And then when it's not, those friction points are becoming much more salient in the consumer and the buyer process. And so I think it's a super interesting time to be in social and to be in, technology in general, just looking at how the development of those augmented relationships are with humans, and how it's going to make our work easier.
Yeah. I mean, and I think like it's um, such an interesting thing that like, uh, whatever it is, like there's so many different ways to sort of manifest it. Um, that idea of like personalization, I think, is just sort of the
Mhm.
undercurrent of what you're saying. Like the idea that it's going to contour like, hey, if I'm looking like this recipe, I probably, am interested in making it. So here are the things that you would need to make it. And yeah, like, DoorDash and tip of the hat. Cause I was just looking, it's like, yeah, they just like IPO'd recently, good for them. But cause yeah, that idea of like, that's even just these sort of like milestones of like, okay, the fact that like DoorDash gets to a point of being a publicly traded company, like any of these companies that are like them, where it's
Yep.
just like, okay, they are integrated into the fabric of our lives and are continuing to push that aspect of sort of digital personalization that
Mhm.
like you're saying like is relevant to our conversation here today because that's what a lot of today's students, whether they are your Gen Z or Gen Alpha coming in in the near future, or folks who are older, like they exist in digitally augmented worlds, that like, because I'm even seeing like, okay, when I'm like watching something on a streaming service or whatever,
Yep.
now, especially I think with like certainly stuff on Prime Video, like the ads that you get if you're, because now Prime Video has ads, or
Yep.
Freebie or whatever else it is, like the ads that you're getting, you can have a QR code to like buy the thing that you're seeing on there. And like that was just like for me, where like
Yep.
I haven't watched like digital streaming content in a while that had ads, and certainly not ones that are like associated with a company like Amazon. But it's like, yeah, it's that idea of like, okay, our algorithms think that you want to see this based on what you're watching or whatever else, and you can just buy it, while you're watching the commercial. So uh all that to be said, I think that's, somewhat of like kind of the story of, how digital student engagement kind of dynamics and kind of digital transformation sort of been playing out and changing over time. Is that like those, sort of aspects of students' experiences are only becoming more sort of profound and pronounced
Mhm.
and everything. So, uh, I guess because I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here. So I'll kind of weave into sort of your day to day, because I think like you've laid out a lot of the context of sort of the history and sort of your perspectives on, you know, uh, the digital world, how it impacts students and how that's changed over time. But like, how do you see kind of digital transformation playing out at your institution? Like working in a community college, and certainly, with your sort of point of view and lens of, engagement and retention and everything. Like, what's your sort of perspective on this, of sort of like the tangible impacts of like what this all kind of means?
Yeah, so I think for what I'm seeing right now is students want ease of use, right? And it really doesn't matter if they're young or if they're older, they're more mature, they're an adult who's returning to school. We're all impatient, right? How many people put food in the microwave, push the button and watch it spin? There's no need to watch it spin, right? It's got a light, it's got a sound. It will tell you with multiple senses when it is done doing. Yet we all watch our food spin, and so we're all impatient. And so what I think what we're seeing right now, especially in our institution, is how can we leverage what the student needs to do at the salient touch points and make sure that we are getting them that information in a more just in time model. The old higher ed model of, the fire hose of information at orientation, you get a big handbook, you send them off on their way, and they'll come in if they have questions, really doesn't work anymore. I mean, higher ed in general is a 1,000-year-old economic model that by and large has only had a few major tweaks to it. And then if we look at what higher ed is in the United States in the, post-industrial revolution, we've taken a system and sort of jailbroken it to do different things than it was ever intended. And as new technologies, as new things and new systems came about, we built sort of a tack on experience to the core sort of what you think of the quote unquote normal student experience, where you're living on campus, going to class, that sort of thing. And so as we've added new things that we've needed to know or do or manage, we've created sort of this smorgasbord of both technology and student experience that is siloed and separate and distinct. And for a lot of colleges and universities, it has either not been something that they've focused on or have not done in a long time, but really looking at mapping what is the intended student experience from start to finish. What are those touch points? What are the communication pieces that need to be deployed at specific times and specific intervals to get the student from point A to point Z? And so that's been something that our institution has really been focusing on, because for me, we have to have something to benchmark against. Otherwise, we're just constantly chasing, the iguanas as they fall from the trees kind of situation. If we know what we want the student to do, then it is up to us as the arbiters of this system to make sure that we are moving students from point A to point Z. Because yes, students are our clients and our customers, but they are also our output, and that makes higher ed very unique in that way. And so, from my work, what we're trying to do is really look at what are we asking the student to do, how are we asking them to do it on the platforms and the systems that we do, what does that look like mapped over a calendar? When are the best times to do it? When is peak time? And then make sure that we are communicating with students when they need it or ahead of when they need it, so that we're not reacting to all of what a student is doing, and we're not constantly scrambling to put out fires. That's just a really
Mhm.
unpleasant way of working, and it makes for a very disjointed student experience. And I think for students that come to college, especially students like our community, right? We've got a lot of first gen, we've got a lot of students who maybe haven't done this before. When they come into a system and there's friction, something doesn't work, it's difficult to register, they can't figure out the portal to get to their classes, they can't read the acronyms or the shorthand or the jargon, they don't think of it as, wow, this is a really complicated system that I have now found myself in. They think of it as, there's something wrong with me. College is hard. Maybe I don't belong here. And that's the exact opposite message that we want to be sending to students. Because they think that they're tech savvy, they're with it, they can use Snapchat, but if they can't figure out how to register for classes, they're not seeing it as, oh, this platform is just really clunky and cumbersome. They see it as, I'm just not smart enough to be in college. And that's the opposite of the message that we want to be sending. And I want to make sure that my students know that, no, it's actually just a really complicated piece of technology that we could get better, and we can do more things, and we could be more explicit in what we're asking you to do. And so I would love to see that happen at more institutions, to do this mapping, sort of the first year experience, the second year experience, bringing those multiple offices to the table to say, okay, what happens in admissions? What are those touch points? Okay, next, what happens in testing? How do they move from testing to orientation to advising to registration to matriculation to the first day of class? And getting those partners all on the same page to start having that conversation, so that it's not, well, retention is my area, so you're in charge of it, and admissions is your area, so you have to stay on that side of the table. We all play for the same team, we all wear the same colors.
Mhm.
And to the student, honestly, we're all one entity. It's the royal we, right? When they come in, they don't say, oh, I talked to this person in the bursar's office, and then I talked to my faculty member, and then I talked to someone in admissions. They just say, I talked to TCC. They don't know that we all work in different offices that are heavily siloed. So we have to bring it together a little bit more for them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're all really good points that you're saying, because it made me think of kind of what you're saying about the student journey mapping. I think it's one of those things that comes up a lot, because I feel like you have to kind of like keep doing it, because it can't just be like, well, we did it once before, we know what the journey is supposed to be. It's like, well, no, that's even something, just you might be recruiting transfer students, or
Mhm.
out of state students, or yeah, like first gen students, or like any of these things. And it might be like, well, we have like you know, kind of the big broad map, and then it's like we might iterate on that to say like, oh, well, actually, yeah, I mean, if you're coming in with transfer credits, that's going to change things. So let's map that out. Oh, if you're coming in and last time you went to college, if you ever did, might have been decades ago. So how's that going to be different? Because you might not have all the same like, paperwork, or
Yep.
whatever we might be asking. Let's not just sort of have it be one size fits all. So it's like it is a continuous iterative effort. And I like
Oh.
how you kind of presented it too, to like uh try to anticipate the bumps in the road and all that, because I think again in this sort of digital age, and a lot of this is likely happening on websites and forums and whatever else, like if you're trying to do something and you hit sometimes even just like like, just like a low level of friction, you're just
Mhm.
going to bail out, because you know how easy it could or should be,
Yep.
and you'll just go somewhere else, because it's just like well, I'm trying to get a certificate in marketing, I guess, to,
Mhm.
keep playing in our marketing world here. And it's like, if you get like so turned around, or sort of like, hit so much friction, it's like, you're probably just going to go somewhere else to get that marketing certificate. Like, it's not maybe necessarily that you're so committed to like, well, I want to get a certificate from TCC. And I guess it happens to be in marketing, whatever. Like,
Yep.
so, those are those things where you might even lose the student before you even realize it. But then kind of what you're saying too, and this will be kind of I guess kind of a follow-up, is the idea that like the conversations now have to be, like I said, so much more grounded in digital student engagement, digital student experiences and everything. So like prior to that, you'd probably have people talking about like a much more analog, in person, on ground students and all that. It's like, well, what about maybe if you're you know, venturing into the online education world? It's like
Mhm.
the student has to literally do every possible thing on that map, that student journey map online. So how do we, you know, kind of interface with that and reconcile that and make sure it's, as seamless of an experience as
Mhm.
something that maybe had been having decades of precedent of like, the person who could come in person to do any number of things. So
Yep.
I guess from your brief experience, and whether maybe you kind of talk about any prior experiences as well, like have you seen sort of those dynamics change, I guess, of how much more interwoven
Yeah.
digital student experiences are into these conversations about like, hurdles and, student journeys and that kind of thing?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because a rising tide rises all ships, right? And so as we get better at deploying our services and meeting the needs of our students, that's going to level up the playing field in ways that we weren't really necessarily anticipating. So the more things a student can do online, for example, not only helps that working professional, non-traditional student, but it helps my rural student who lives 3 hours away and doesn't have a car, right? It's an unintended happy happenstance that being more accessible actually makes us more accessible for all of my students. For maybe a student who's chronically ill and is doing classes from a hospital room, or is doing them from home because they are immunocompromised, or they are a deaf student and they are using a relay when they couldn't necessarily get an interpreter to come to campus. So accessibility just really is leveled up by this idea that we're expanding services. So that part is fantastic. And then also, yes, from a market share standpoint, right, we know that there are more colleges in the US than the population can really sustain, right? We know that. um, we have an awful lot of them, and in sort of the capitalistic space, we look at, well, the better product, the better service, they're going to compete and they're going to win out. Higher ed is different, right? We have mission driven institutions, we've got for profit institutions, nonprofit institutions, and so is there space for everyone? Probably. um, but who is going to get the lion's share or the early mover advantage is going to be the ones that serve students best. And honestly, as a student serving institution, this is something we can really get behind, right? It's not scammy or marketingy or salesy to say we deserve any student that walks through our door that says they want to get a credential from us, we need to serve them in what they need, right? They came to us, they intend to get a degree from us. They're not intending to quit halfway through. They're not intending to bail on their goal or their dream. And so, are we doing what we can to make sure that we can get them across the field? And then also, are we servicing the students that we serve best, right? What does that look like? So as a degree granting institution in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that's going to look different than a private liberal arts institution in the Northeast, but that's okay because we serve the students that we serve, and we serve them in the best way. So I
Hmm.
think that is something that I think senior leaders can take away from this is, do you know who the student you serve best is? Are your processes, policies, technology, pieces of your tech stack, you're doing the business of the university or college, is it aligned in such a way that it serves the students that you serve best, so that you're attracting students that are going to be a good fit to your institution? And then, are you benchmarking against your intended outcomes, so that way if there is a hole in the process or the workflow, that it's not just students are falling through the cracks and then they disappear and you don't know what happened. You can patch that leak and say, oh, here's where that gap in process went. Let's snug those students back into the workflow. um, and and not make it so much on the student. I think higher ed very much sort of says, well, any attrition, it's on the student. We can lead them to water, but we can't make them drink. We can't make them go to
Hmm.
class. And that's fine for the big name institutions that are going to survive, right? The big places with the $1 billion endowments, they don't have to worry as much about their students. They could never charge tuition for the next 300 years and they will be completely fine. They've got the name recognition. But for everybody else, every student that we lose is a student who isn't fulfilling that goal or dream that they're getting into. And so for me, that's the crux of the work, in making sure that every student who raises their hand and says, I want to get a degree from your institution, has the equal opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it's really well said. And I think the idea of, the difference of like different institutions, like, community colleges being more open access and
Mhm.
really integrating into their, local community, it's that much more important to me that, like you said, it's like, yeah, we don't maybe need to like market ourselves so much and put so much of our limited resources into that. It's like, if we're providing good services to our students that are relevant and, easy to navigate and all that. It's like that's going to be a tailwind for like that word of mouth and that sort of goodwill and all that. It's just going to really support us because, yeah, I mean, that idea of if they're seeking an institution and an experience like a community college to serve their needs, to further their goals, and improve their career prospects and everything, it's like they might just go to like, I mean, there's like other community colleges
Mhm.
or other offerings, and it's the idea of like, well, something clued them in
Yep.
to us. Let's make sure we don't, you know, have that sort of earnest kind of desire or whatever sort of is attracting them in just be sort of for naught.
Yep.
And the idea of kind of what you're saying to me is that like there's so much potential in technology and creating these great digital student experiences, but if you're not maintaining them and patching those holes and sort of doing that kind of work
Mhm.
to continuously improve them, it can almost get in the way. Like the idea of like if you have like a clunky website that's not working on mobile, it's like, well, it works. I'll pull it up on my computer in my office. It looks great. It's like, well, it doesn't really work well on tablet
Exactly.
or smartphone, or like we don't really have an app, so that's kind of like a going to limit our functionality on those fronts as well. So it's the idea of like you need to keep that continuous improvement mindset, and like what you're saying too, you know, making sure that all stakeholders can bring their point of view because they can kind of say like, oh, I've got this nagging issue or that, this,
Mhm.
that, the other thing. And you can maybe work with IT colleagues or whomever else where they're like, well, actually, maybe we can like create a more cohesive connection between, this system and that system. So it's not just like, well, you've got the thing that works well for you and all that, but we're kind of, hitting a lot of friction. It's like, well, maybe if like student puts in the application, all this information goes here, we could just pull it in and we don't have to ask the same question,
Mhm.
a dozen times. It's like we know who this person is if they're clicking that link in their email or
Yep.
on their portal or whatever. It's personalized, it's personalized to them, and we know that they're this person, this date of birth, who applied for this program. We just need some additional things to say, I don't know, kind of guide you towards the next
Yes.
points in the process or
That's
something. So
exactly it,
yeah.
and I think colleges especially, we love our processes. We love our acronyms. We like a good, alliteration, and when we try to we design processes and then we expect the people to work the process, but the people don't understand the process because they don't live it every day. What is a credit hour? What is a bursar? That's not a word. My student told me that the only reason they know what that is because it was a line from Hamilton, and then context clues figured it out. That's the person you give the money to, right? So I would challenge higher ed institutions to start with the people first and then build your processes around it. And don't be afraid to say, this isn't working from a deployment standpoint. Can we change the process? Can we change the technology of which we are doing this to, so that we are having the intended outcome, and what the actual outcome is, versus we need student to do this, which feeds into this system, which feeds into this, which this person works that form. That's a very linear mindset. And I like to say, it's all low hanging fruit if you cut the tree down. It's a system. Systems can be designed to any way you want. And so if you're looking at, we're having these gaps, we're having these process problems, this is where our system is failing. The system is designed to give you the exact results you are getting. And so if you're not looking into those underlying issues and really looking at your tech stack and how it's wrapped around your processes and how it's connected to your people, then you're leaving some opportunity on the table, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and I think like the one clear example that hopefully can kind of get people kind of germinating on ideas of how this might apply to them is like, are you asking too many questions,
Hmm.
and or are you asking like the wrong questions or in the wrong way or whatever else? Because I think like it's that idea of to what you're saying, if people have accessibility needs or different things like that, like traditionally in higher ed, and again, it's that idea of like you're putting the onus entirely on the student.
Hmm.
And if they didn't do it the right way in the right time or whatever, then it's like, well, sorry, you're kind of out of luck, and, you can't really oftentimes sort of like backdate it if it's like, oh, well, you really struggled in that exam because you didn't get the accommodations you needed and all that. It's like,
Hmm.
well, sorry, we can't you did it now. We'll do it moving forward. We'll
Yep.
give you what you need, but we can't have you go retake that exam necessarily, or it's at the complete discretion of the faculty member or whatever. It's
Yep.
like, okay, all right, well, that's a major, kind of oversight here, can we embed maybe in different, forms of like, okay, this is a deposited student, they're ready to go, they're getting started next term, maybe it's some sort of form in the orientation process. We can
Mhm.
ask them about different things. I don't like, and that's
Yes.
me
Yeah.
with complete naivete. I'm sure maybe it's more complicated than that, but that's at least sort of the mindset is that like if you could get earlier indicators
Mhm.
of a student opting in
Yeah.
to say like, yes, I would love to hear about this particular resource, or yes, I need this or that, versus just I get like, you started off with one of these points of that idea of, we've built it and they will come. We
Mhm.
told them all about it when they were, in orientation however long ago and all those sort of things. It's like you can maybe kind of preempt, or they're a part of some mailing list of people that,
Mhm.
you can kind of keep checking in on and being like, hey, you indicated interest in tutoring. That's might be something that you would find valuable,
Mhm.
because obviously anybody else could still just walk in the door and get that resource. But like,
Yeah.
it's maybe things like that that like you can, you know, I don't know, just work a little bit smarter versus like, you send an email blast to every single active student on campus saying, hey, tutoring's here,
Yep.
use it if you want or
Yep.
something. It's like you might know that there's potential people where it's like, I know that tutoring would be super helpful to me. I could use all the help that I can get.
Mhm.
I have no qualms about that. And it's like, all right, cool. We'll check in with you. Keep seeing, be like, hey, if have you looked into tutoring yet or
Yeah.
stuff like that. So I think that yeah, it's a little mindset shifts, and even just the point of what you're saying of like try to not just have a system or a process that works for your staff member. It's like
Yes.
hopefully that always is always
Yep.
is the case, but also works well for the students. Like I think it's been like so much weight put on that side of like, hey, this
Mhm.
works well for me as the bursar. Like I get everything I need, but it's like, well, that student had to jump through 50 hoops and print
Exactly.
this out and send a fax and scan the fax and mail it in and whatever. It's like,
Mhm.
how about we try to alleviate that a little bit to where it's like, did you need all that? Did you need all the all the sort of like official notarized this that the other to just like do
And it
do
really
something?
is.
So
I mean, that is so much of it. And I think for such a long time, because higher ed is full of smart people, right? If you build it, they will come. That we 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 put so much of the onus on the student. Well, they need to read their emails. Well, they need to register on time. They need to pay on time. Well, in this relationship, the student is the person who knows the least. Why are we letting
mm,
them drive the bus? This is not a bus sort of situation. This is more of like a train station. The trains are going to keep leaving the system on schedule, right? They're going to keep leaving the station. So, how are we making the rules of the game explicit for the student in a way that they can understand so that they can do the business that they came to do? And for a lot of colleges and institutions, that's a complete 180 in terms of the way of thinking. um, and even in the terms of the acronyms that we use, right? What's the difference between a drop and a withdrawal? Is that synonymous the way credit and hour is synonymous? No, totally different. There's ramifications to things. And for those of us at institutions that serve a population that is coming in without that knowledge, I think we have a duty to our students to try to be better than, the other institutions, to say, well, this is the first time you've been to college. Let's explain it a little bit more. And let's deliver that using just in time interventions and nudges that technology has now afforded us, right? There's technology now that I can analyze my students' Wi Fi data and say, hey, this student hasn't pinged on campus in a week. That probably means they haven't been to class. I don't need to wait for the faculty member to do attendance. I could send a just in time communique to that student to say, hey, just checking up on you. How are things going? So we can replicate what happens at a small liberal arts residential school where someone would walk down the hallway and knock on that student's door. I can replicate it at a school of 25,000 in a way that feels deeply personal and individualized, but I'm using it with a technology augmentation with it. Or being able to say, hey, this student hasn't pinged on Wi Fi in the library, and they're an engineering major and we know that's really important for them, so let's send a just in time push notification to those students, just those students, to say, hey, as an engineering major, did you know that you have a special place in the library just for you? Like, those sort of things that technology allows us to do, rather than being scared of it, rather than being, oh gosh, this is going to change our work and we hate change, it's the big scary C word, and we do nothing quickly, or with expediency in higher ed, it just runs a little bit slower. see this as an opportunity to level that up and get more of your students the information they need, and to honestly make it easier on your staff. I think every industry right now is having a real hard time retaining your qualified workforce. And in higher ed, when those employees leave, they walk out the door with all that institutional knowledge to say, well, actually, that form is this way because of these five things that you should have known about. And we really can't afford to have the turnover in staff that we're seeing. And so, how can we work smarter and harder on the behalf of our students, but also do it in a way that is more natural to the human process and with less effort?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of something that I'm glad I've seen still kind of circulating around in the right sort of spaces, like folks talking about digital experience in higher ed, is the idea of like high tech and a high touch. Like,
Yes.
how can you have those nudges and those sort of things where it's like, education is a deeply human process.
Hmm.
So how can we uh, get the right help to the right people in the right time, sort of thing, and do it in a human way, or make sure that like, yeah, maybe you do that thing about like, 'cause obviously again, it's like all things considered, a simple formula of like a time based, have this person does this thing like the last week or whatever, send them a text message that you've, kind of pre drafted. But the idea that like, okay, they get that text message. Naturally, somebody might be like, especially if you're like, hey, this is Cassandra, like, just checking in on you, like, whatever. They might be like, oh, yeah, yeah, could you tell me more about that? Or like, what are the hours, whatever. And there could be people where it's like, yeah, I'm sitting at my desk and one of the tabs I got to open in is like basically like a live desk thing where it's got all
Hmm.
these texts coming in and say idea of like that student's getting the right help, the right time, and the right way, and it's human, whatever. So yeah, I think those are like kind of paradigm shifts of like let's you know uh, help technology to sort of like get out of the way, and where it is sort of supplementing and sort of scaffolding and all those sort of things. And I think just talk to your friendly neighborhood IT colleague or
Yes.
ed tech person or whoever, as you're thinking about like the best way to do these things, because I think that's even the thing too, is like as we've talked about sort of institutional differences as well. It's like there's not one right only way to do this. There's going to be a lot of different institutional culture
Hmm.
ways, or just preferences or priorities and stuff like that. So that's just certainly in to your sort of efforts making spaces for people to come together and collaborate. Like that's where sort of the magic happens as well. Somebody's going to say like, hey, I did it this way, and it worked out this way or whatever. Learn these kind of lessons, and somebody else is like, oh, I was thinking about this, and I'm going to kind of take your idea and my idea and put it together and do great things. So but we will wrap up here. Covered a lot of amazing things. We will end with the question we ask all of our guests: what does a connected campus look and or feel like to you?
Oh my gosh. I would say a connected campus is one where everyone has embraced the idea that we are all here for student success, that everybody knows not only the work that they do, but how it fits into the larger context of the student experience at the institution. And that to the extent possible that we are minimizing the friction and the runaround for the end user, both student and staff, and a way to make the work that needs to be done as organic and easy to follow as possible. And with a technology stack that not only communicates to each other, but also to senior leaders so that they are able to, at a moment's notice, be able to sort and filter data that is siloed into multiple technology pieces and query against each other. So whether that's a dashboard, whether that is an augmented system, so that senior leaders are getting an accurate representation of the health of their population and the health of their institution, and how the student as a product is moving from point A through point Z, and understanding if there is friction in the system, that we have intentionally designed supports around those pieces so that we are, to the extent possible, mitigating as much as possible. Not every student's going to pass every class. Not every student's going to commit to staying in town for 2, 3 years to get their degree. We know that, but that we are not losing students for silly things like they got frustrated because they needed to stamp a form in the year 2024. That they needed to fax something anywhere other than back to 1986. Those sort of things, that we're not We're not asking people to jump through hoops because it is a process that we've created processes and policies that are human centered, um, and easy to manage. So I want to work
Yeah,
that
yeah.
kind of campus anyway. That
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone could agree with that. Because yeah, I mean, what I'm hearing is like, connected campus equals it's people, it's system. Just that idea of it's not just one thing. It's all of those things, and then all of those things like interconnected together, kind of like they're all impacting each other because it's like people make systems. These are not just sort of processes or platforms, whatever else. That are just sort of like natural law, like it's existed forever and will always
Yep.
exist. It's like people made them and they can make them different or better or whatever.
Yes.
And that like it's certainly people working together, like because it shouldn't solely be like on your shoulders where
Mhm.
it's like, yeah, I care a lot about this, I care about retention, and I can guide this work, but it takes the input and support of a lot of other folks, and the idea that like I guess it's like even just in the simplest way, like that is the equation, is that it's like connected campus equals like systems plus people, because like it's
Mhm.
people interacting with the systems and making the system, that
Yes.
it could get very sort of like meta and mind melty, I guess, with all this kind of sort of esoteric stuff. But I think it's certainly motivating to me and sort of reassuring to me, that idea that the perspective that you have, that you're advocating for, very human centered, very empathetic, and just you know optimistic about sort of the potential of kind of marrying, high tech, high touch, and just supporting students as they pursue the goals, whatever they might be, at whatever institution they might go to, and those sort of things. Like there's so much that we can do for them,
Yes.
and sort of keep maintaining really positive, engaging digital student
And
experiences. So
that's
yeah.
everything, right? I believe in the transformative power of higher ed. I was a kid from the trailer park. I don't have parents. I was in foster care and I was able to get a doctorate from Vanderbilt. So I can show anyone else how to do that, right? I think going to college is one of the most fun things you can do with your life. It is also a huge investment. It's probably one of the larger investments other than your house, that you could make, both in terms of time and money. And I want to see more students have the opportunity to do that. And I had great mentors along the way and was really lucky in that. And so how can I scale that for all 24,000 of my current students, right? How can I make sure that they are having a transformative experience when it is they are one of 24,000, right? There's no way that I'm going to be able to build a personal relationship with all of them. But I can with some technology and some just in time supports with the tech. And we know that humans will interact with that. We know that we feel that IRL relationships are just as equally relevant as virtual relationships. And so I think the groundwork is there. I think the possibilities are open to it. We know that folks will interact with chatbots and that they will interact with online spaces, in a very natural human way. And so let's use that to make our institutions better. I'm all for it.
Yeah, great place to end it. Some great stuff shared. We'll have ways to connect with you and the stuff we talked about in the description for this episode. But thanks so much for hanging out and all that you do to kind of help support us and help support all of your students.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me, Dustin. This has been great. And yeah, you guys have my contact information. So if people want to chat, reach out, find me in higher ed social or Google me. I'm on all of it. Yeah, happy to chat. I love talking about this work. So happy to meet other bright people with some really cool ideas, and let's change the world.
Thanks for listening to The Connected Campus. Please leave a 5-star review for the show and share it so others can discover us. Make sure to also subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Connected Campus.